at the end of the day, he'll just veto it and go, all of it's out. I've already said everything. There's nothing new here.
Was that this pedophile ring was somehow tied to intelligence.
Now, you could call it, we're in cahoots or there's some kind of conspiracy. And if there is, it's a conspiracy of dunces.
Hey, Detoxers. Welcome to a special episode of the Disinfo Detox. Today, I am joined by a former CNN political analyst and senior White House correspondent for Playboy and the current host of Just Ask the Question with Brian Karem. Brian Karem, welcome to the Disinfo Detox.
Well, pleasure being here, Nolan. How you doing?
Doing well, man. Thanks a lot for coming on. I guess we should jump right into it. There's a giant breakup that is drawing the attention of America between Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump. What do you make of what we're seeing so far with this?
How many times has he broken up with how many people, and they always get back together? That's I saw the interview with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she gave an apology for her toxic behavior, which made me think this is more than just the usual nonsense that we see out of MAGA.
Dana, I think that's fair criticism, and I would like to say humbly, I'm sorry for taking part in the toxic politics. It's very bad for our country, and it's been something I've thought about a lot, especially since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Is that I'm only responsible for myself and my own words and actions, and I am committed, and I've been working on this a lot lately, to put down the knives in politics. I really just want to see people be kind to one another, and we need to figure out a new path forward that is focused on the American people, because as Americans, no matter what side of the aisle we're on, we have far more in common than we have differences. Yeah.
But, then again, how many times has he broken up with Bannon and brought him back to the fold? How many times has he, and he's notorious for bringing people back into the fold that have often dissed him or said he's hateful, including his vice president, J.D. Vance. So I guess you have to take it with a grain of salt. But that extended interview does make me believe that there's something else to this. I don't know what the agenda is. I don't believe it's just straight up, I'm sorry, but that's me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think there's something to that because, I think a lot of people in news media are rightly kind of pointing out that Trump is getting some pushback from MAGA that we haven't really seen in his second term. Particularly, we saw in states like Indiana and Kansas kind of ignoring him on redistricting, and now Marjorie Taylor Greene. And kind of the belief is that the defeat in the election and his dropping polling numbers are indicating to a lot of Trump supporters that they need to start thinking about a Republican Party post-Trump. What do you make of that? Do you think that's kind of spot on in what you're seeing as well? Or do you think that's too much like liberal wish casting?
No, I think it's, I don't know if it probably is wishful thinking on the part of the Democrats, because how many times have they said, he's over, Donnie is over, this one's going to kill him. And he's like, a New York sewer rat. He just survives. So there is part of that. But Thomas Massie, the representative from Kentucky, said, listen, there will be a point in time where Donald Trump is no longer around, but that vote for pedophiles that you have given will live forever. And so that's pretty telling in and of itself. But you have to remember the reason why MAGA is upset with him. And this comes from Marjorie Taylor Greene. This comes from Boebert. This comes from everyone in that MAGA inner sphere. Donald Trump, on the campaign trail, said he will release the Epstein files because they believe there is a deep state, and that Donald Trump said he was going to expose the deep state. Donald Trump is, of course, part of the deep state, but that's a different story. So he has not lived up to that particular promise. And all the conspiracy-minded people and all the people who voted for him specifically for that reason are upset with him now. And they will continue to be upset with him. And him changing his tune, this is as we record a Monday, and on Sunday night, he changed his rhetoric and said, yes, go ahead and release the Epstein files. Well, that's because there are people who want him to release the Epstein files. He can read the tea leaves. But don't forget, people, this doesn't mean that the Epstein files are going to be released, because once this is passed, it's still got to go to the Senate. and pass, and it'll never get picked. This bill will never be picked up in the Senate. And if it is, and if it's passed, and it's essentially the same bill, and it doesn't have to go through reconciliation with the House, and it ends up on the, where does it? Oh yeah, it would end up on the president's desk. So what are the chances of him vetoing it? I'd say, get your betting app out, and you've got a 90-10 chance he's going to, for whatever reason, decide to veto this bill, and you won't get 2/3 in either the House or the Senate to override the veto. So it's much ado about nothing as far as that goes. But as far as the MAGA people go, yes, this is a break. This is a difference. This is a change, a game changer.
Yeah, and I had a similar take on that. Trump's announcement Sunday night that he supported releasing the Epstein files, because I think it's very clear to him he's lost the House on this issue. And to your point, I don't even think it'll make it to his desk. I could see him easily having a few senators who say, like, look, we're going to pass we may kill the bill, but even if we pass the bill, we'll have some mechanism where there's like a committee that needs to review it to make sure we protect victims, and essentially like no documents will actually ever get out, or something, or make a recommendation to the president about which documents should be released. Then that recommendation will never come. There's so many ways to stop it, even by supporting it. And I think Trump finally found a message he feels, comfortable with, right?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, he'll just veto it and go, all of it's out. I've already said everything. There's nothing new here. It's all the Democrats' fault, the evil Democrats. By the way, the evil Democrats are, haphazard and can't govern, but boy, are they really smart when it comes to victimizing the president. They are spot on then. I mean, the evil Democrats, they're incompetent unless they're going after Donnie. So
Yeah, and let's talk about another one of his enemies that I think used to be one of them in the media, CNN. He he mentioned, the media attention has been really focused on largely Trump, but some other figures, particularly around this question of whether or not they engaged in pedophilia and or knew about Epstein's crimes. And I have a few kind of questions I'd like you to kind of speak to that I'm interested in hearing your view on. One is, and seems minor, but it's kind of big to me, that they keep using the language underage girls versus children. What do you make of that decision by media?
We suck. Yeah. What do you want? I mean, look, underage females. Donald Trump, more to the point, Donald Trump treats people like furniture. Remember when this all came about because Donald Trump dropped a dime on Jeff Epstein when a stray reporter asked him a question many months ago about Mar-a-Lago and Jeff Epstein, and he said Jeff Epstein stole some of his workers, like they were a piece of furniture. Not that Jeff Epstein decided to hire someone away from Mar-a-Lago, but stole them. And then we started referring to him as an underage, and I'm going, wait a minute, what underage? This was a child. This was a minor. This is and we have it, and not only did he said that's the reason why he broke up with Jeff is because he stole somebody who, by the way, was a minor working in your spa. So, and she later committed suicide. This is the same. And we have treated this. I love the term sane washing. We have sane washed Donald Trump to the point where anything that he does, we find some way to make it sound normal. And I'm sorry, it's not. And this isn't, and I know part of it is because we want the public to believe that we are even-handed in everything that we do. And in so doing, we have actually cut our balls out from ourselves. We have undercut the reason for our existence. A lot of people say truth to power. I say facts, because there are 4,000 different, religions on this planet, and all of them have their own truth. So I'm not going to tell you what the truth is, but I will try to tell you what vetted factual information is, and applying the scientific method to communication to the people to disseminate news is what I try to do. So I'm not going to sane wash what this was. This is pedophilia. This isn't underage girls. These are children. And Thomas Massey is and it was a Republican from the state, the wonderful state of Kentucky.
Produces some good people.
Yeah, good people there who called it out and said, listen, Trump will be long gone, but a vote for pedophilia is forever. damn it, that's exactly what this is. This is child abuse. And, you want to talk about, I saw Fox News had a picture of Representative Sherman from California who said he was looking at porno on his tablet. I'm going, all right, that's bad, but I mean, how do you even compare that with pedophilia? How? Well, I mean, you're looking at porn, all right, you're a horny old guy. And the guy's, looking at it saying, I didn't know they were sending me, I like how he blamed Elon Musk. These people send me stuff over the internet. I don't even know what it is. Fine. But no one's accusing him of diddling underage children. Children is what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's important to underscore because some folks have just like twisted themselves in knots, including on the right, to make this about anything else. Like I saw Megyn Kelly, I think it was over this weekend. She said that she had heard that Epstein was what she called into barely legal girls.
As a reminder, I do know somebody very, very close to this case who is in a position to know virtually everything. Not everything, but virtually everything. And this person has told me from the start, years and years ago, that Jeffrey Epstein, in this person's view, was not a pedophile. This is this person's view, who was there for a lot of this, but that he was into the barely legal type. Like he liked 15-year-old girls.
But she was mentioning 15-year-olds, and I was like, the term barely legal does not apply to 15-year-olds, but even if it did, that's still
not
misrepresenting.
Not even in the great state of Kentucky, or you marry your underage cousin. Even Jerry Lee Lewis would be looking at this, going, "Wait a minute, this is too much for me."
But you're gonna get me. Holidays are coming up. You're gonna get me in so much trouble, Brian.
Well, look, man, this reminds me, honestly, if I'm going to be honest about it, it reminds me of what the priests, how they move priests around in the Catholic Church, pretending that. And I remember one time interviewing one of them. They're going, the problem is the Catholic Church believed that for some reason priests became pedophiles. No, pedophiles became priests. They go to where the children are. Why do you think Donald Trump and Jeff Epstein and Ghislaine, why did they do what they do? They are who they are. Politics didn't make them that way. Business didn't make them that way. And certainly the Republican Party, as much as the Republicans and the Democrats would love to say that, and the Republicans loathe it, that partisan politics didn't call them out for what they are. And then let's get back to real political issues. This is child abuse. It's nothing more than child abuse. So for the love of God, call it out for what it is.
Okay, and so back to this sort of topic about the critiques of the media. One of the, sort of, I guess, guesses or accusations was that Jeff Epstein was running this kind of international pedophile ring, which, more and more evidence, these emails seems to confirm that. But another kind of closely related, I guess, conspiracy off that conspiracy was that this pedophile ring was somehow tied to intelligence, that it was an opportunity to get powerful people in certain positions or situations that you could use and hold as leverage over them. And, I think the media has really not tackled that well. And in a lot of these emails, we are seeing, examples of the intelligence or members of the intelligence community communicating with Jeff Epstein. I know Dropside News has done a lot to cover Israeli intelligence, but there's certainly been U.S. intelligence communications. From someone who worked in those media spaces, what do you think is kind of the hesitancy to even engage with some of those questions, even if it is to dispel those myths?
We suck.
I'm noticing a trend here. Yeah.
But the problem, all right, so the problem with the press is you have people in the press today that don't have the gravitas of the experience to be where they are. And certainly you're not going to find anybody in the intelligence doing intelligence in the press, maybe two mutually exclusive terms. But those who have the experience covering the intelligence community don't exist anymore, nor does that exist in the White House. When I walked into the White House for the very first time in 1985, it was Sam Donaldson who pointed out to me, he said, "You pay attention to that first row right there, Brian, in the Brady briefing room. There's more than 200 years of experience there. You'd be lucky if you find 100 today or 70 among those 7. They hire people straight out of college who have no idea how to even cover a beat and then turn them loose. And it's all access journalism all the time. So it's all about the viral moment. It's all about making sure that you get heard, and it's making sure that you have access. So That's a huge problem, and that's going to continue to be a problem. That's why we don't do our job very well. Until you bust up the media monopolies, institute, go back a little bit to the way we used to be, limiting ownership so that, one company can't be like Sinclair. I'm not going to mention their name, Sinclair, Sinclair, who have bought out a couple of hundred stations, or the Alden Group, which is a vulture capital group that owns 200 or 300 newspapers, and they trim these staffs down to a bare minimum, and they don't want to hire anybody and pay them any money, so they hire them straight out of college. 3 or 4 years later, they're booted out, and they hire fresh. So it keeps the payroll low, as much as they can, their profits high, and it's all because government has been destroying the free press for the last 40 years since Ronald Reagan, and the oligarchs who own most of the media are in cahoots with government. And I'm saying not just the Republicans and the Democrats. Every president since Reagan has destroyed the free press. So you can't get that type of reporting today. And you're not going to get that type of reporting today. Do you think you're going to get it out of out of the Pentagon? You've got Laura Loomer covering it now, folks. So that tells you where that's at. All the legitimate reporters are out, and they're bringing in the propagandists. They worried about us walking around classified areas in the Pentagon or the White House, and that's a complete and utter bullshit lie. But I'll guarantee you Laura Loomer probably has access to Pete Hegseth's, makeup room, but that's just me.
Yeah. then, okay, closely related. I know there's been a lot of critiques online about how, some of these emails, particularly, I believe, with Michael Wolff, who was a reporter, were on like the New York Times server. So some of the stuff that's coming out now, theoretically the New York Times had access to. And a lot of people I think online are pointing to that as a conspiracy of how the media is, part of the great cover up. But from what your perspective, I hear you correctly. You're saying, no, this is just kind of incompetence. So there's not the right people in the right place to understand how to look at this evidence or share it.
Well, now you could call it, we're in cahoots, or there's some kind of conspiracy. And if there is, it's a conspiracy of dunces, because at the bottom line, the press is about making money, and the New York Times isn't what it used to be. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when they had more copy editors, and you'd be loath to find a copy editing mistake in the New York Times, which you will find on a daily basis in every newspaper in the United States today. So, are they in cahoots with government to hide this? I think the old saying is probably true. Don't ascribe to conspiracy what you can accurately describe to don't ascribe to misfeasance and malfeasance, incompetence. So I think there could be. Could there be? Of course there could be. I mean, because there are individual reporters and editors who cozy up to government. That's not unheard of, and it's been done way before my time. It was H.L. Mencken, in 1927 in his Prejudices series, where he outlined the problems of the free press being, we're too close to government. We think we're part of it, and we're not. That's not new. That's, but the extent that you have today, it's overwhelming. It's because when I got into this business, 24 companies owned and operated 80 to 82% of what you see, read, or hear. Today, it's 4 or 5 companies that operate 90 to 95%. Local media almost doesn't exist anymore. There are vast media deserts across the United States where there is no local media. So what you have is it's a bit of both, but it really boils down to today, it's incompetence.
Yeah, and it's interesting to point that out, because I think a lot of younger listeners and viewers, this has been the news media they've seen, where people leave, the White House or Congress and end up on, CNN and like the late night shows or Fox News or whatever it may be. But can you talk a little bit about that? It wasn't always like that, right? At least the press tried to keep that separation.
There was, I got in towards the end of what I don't think there was ever, a rah-rah time for the press. I don't think there was ever a golden age of the press. But there was a time when there were, it was Ben Bagdikian, who was the editor one of the editors of the Washington Post, said, if you want independent reporting, you have to have an independent press. So, and one of my favorite quotes goes back to Ben Dickey, and I'll just quote it because I always have it right in front of me. Never forget that your obligation is to the people. It is not at heart to those who pay you, or to your editor, or to your sources, or to your friends, or to the advancement of your career. It is to the public. Not anymore. So that was when I first got into it. There was that romance that was still there. And by God, we didn't cower before the president. They cowered before us. I mean, you talk to anybody in the Clinton administration and they would tell you, they would walk up and give, Helen Thomas coffee and donuts in the morning while she stood there and queried them and and quizzed them and grilled them. And I almost made a Donald Trump word there, grizzled her. So so she would grizzle and go after them. And we don't do that anymore. So that has changed. The scope of my business has changed dramatically over the last 40 years. And kids coming up, young adults today, and I call them kids, but those coming up today don't see what I saw firsthand. Every place I've ever worked at has been absorbed, closed, bought out, or doesn't even exist anymore. Many of the newspapers, many of the networks, everything has all been bought up. And so what you see today, and people know what's wrong. People, they don't know what's wrong. They know something is wrong. Mm-hmm. And they ascribe different things to it. Oh, you're left-leaning. Oh, you're right-leaning. And it's neither of those things. It's the government taking over the press, destroying it, and letting the oligarchs run wild and make as much money as possible. So real journalism, you're right, doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, and I think now it's been almost 15 years. But I can remember Chuck Todd. I think this was when he was at Meet the Press. He said that comment about after he was criticized for giving a very kind of softball interview to, I think, then Vice President Dick Cheney. And Chuck Todd was really honest. He said, if I ask him tough questions, he doesn't come back on my show. The White House won't send people to my show, and my ratings drop. And he got a lot of flack for it, but it was an interesting moment of honesty about where kind of like all the incentives were in the industry, right? That as someone who was given that position, the network or cable news network expected him to have guests on who were at a certain level of fame or power. Did you have any experience sort of like getting pressured in any of those directions when you worked in the press?
I'm still in the press and I still get those pressures every day. And I am of an age where I say, I don't give a shit. I'm here. You don't want to talk to me. I've got sources. I'll find out. If you don't like it, tough. But that's, we used to be that way. And it used to be, and I learned that way. And I learned from the best. I learned from Helen Thomas and Sam Donaldson and Walter Cronkite and those people who definitely, and look, we've always had opinions in this, and the opinions were usually labeled. It was Walter Cronkite who ended a presidential bid because he said he didn't think after a 2-hour documentary on the Vietnam War, he came out and he said, I don't think we can win this war. People understood him because of all people, Walter Cronkite was in World War II as a reporter and saw firsthand combat as I have. And I can tell you that I respect the people who have the experience. And Walter Cronkite, when he said that, the American people understood that. And that was the end of LBJ. Unfortunately, that brought us Richard Nixon. So ultimately, you could say, damn it, he should have shut up. But the truth is, facts are never a bad thing. It's what we do with them that is. And our inability to provide vetted factual information to the American public is one of the greatest failures of modern culture.
And let's talk about something you said a moment ago. You reminded the audience you're still in the press. I've had the pleasure of being a guest in your podcast, and I read all the stuff you're writing as well. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing now? And kind of we've talked a lot about the dismantling of the old model, but with what you're doing now in mind, kind of talk about some of the opportunities that this so-called like new media presents that you're taking advantage of.
I have a foot in both. I still am, legacy or corporate media, but I like the independent media, the ability to say what you want without ever having to worry about pleasing someone and changing your words to please them. I find that an anathema to free speech, and unfortunately a very necessary part of the corporate world. That being said, while I love new media and I love Substack, Twitter, people go, I hate Twitter because I'm going, I don't know. Some of my best fans are my haters. They read everything I write. And they go, I read what you wrote and it sucks. Thank you for reading. What do you want me to say? Read again. I don't care what you think of it. I'm glad you had a thought. And maybe you'll wake up one day and realize that you're full of shit. But nonetheless, I love every part of it with this caveat. I think the new media model has to incorporate some of the old media model. And the model that I want to see and what I think is necessary for making sure that we have credibility, whether it's new media or old media, you need copy editors. Journalism is a cooperative, collaborative effort. You go to cover a story, it's not, if you're in TV, it's not just you, it's a photographer. Sometimes it's a sound guy, a producer, somebody in your ear while you're live talking, the interview subject. There are a lot of people involved in it, and you need that. In a newspaper setting, it's you, it's sometimes a photographer, and always there has to be a copy editor. Someone over your shoulder saying, where did you get that quote? Is that the correct way to refer to that person? This is your opinion, not a fact. This is going out. And making sure that we're straight about the very dictates that I ascribe to, Ben Bagdickian when he said, your responsibility is to the people. Now, we're going to be called whatever we're going to be called at the end of the day, hacks, fake media, whatever. But as long as you know in your heart you delivered vetted factual information and not just your opinion, then that's great. I've mentored a lot of young reporters. I've had them come up to me and go, I got a great story. This is what I think. And I go, I don't give a shit what you think. I barely care what I think. What do you know? So the ability to separate facts from fantasy and opinion is key. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. We all should share the same facts. And that's that's why I say real journalism, real reporting. And I even hate saying journalism, Nolan, because journalism is like, when I was a kid, a journalist is what you call an out-of-work reporter. But the reporting, you've got to get vetted factual information. It's using the scientific method and applying that to communication. And if you do that, I think no matter your new media, old media, whatever media, you're doing the job of a reporter. Otherwise, everyone's entitled to their opinion. You and I are sitting here talking. We're giving our opinion, and that's cool. But for people to be able to, and I think ultimately the greatest credibility is when someone will read you and go, I don't like him, but the son of a bitch I know that he's giving me the facts.
I completely agree. I think that's always the goal. I don't need people to like what I'm saying, but I need them to believe my credibility and support it. Right. So Brian, with that in mind, remind folks, I don't know how many podcasts you're doing now. What podcasts are you doing, and where can they access your stuff and read your work?
38,000. The podcast is called Just Ask the Question, wherever fine podcasts are sold. We do a week in review called Just Ask the Press, where we have members of the press reviewing the week in review of the news, also on the Just Ask the Question network. And then the name of the book is called Free the Press, which talks about many of the issues we've talked about today. It's in its third print. What the hell? I even have a copy of it right here. It's in its third printing. Yeah. Now I'm Donald Trump. I'm holding the Bible upside down. That's wherever fine books are sold. And of course, weekly in the column on Salon. So nice. That's pretty much, I think that's run the gamut.
You're doing great stuff. I highly encourage the audience to check you out.
I love your stuff, man. I was so good having you on the show. It's independent thinking and education, man. That's critical thinking, key to everything. And I appreciate you. I really do.
You as well, Brian. We'll do this again soon, all right?
Anytime you want, brother.
Thanks for tuning in, Detoxers. Hey, before you get out of here, please make sure you like, follow, comment, and subscribe. If you've got a couple extra bucks in your pocket, use the Substack link in the description to head on over to Substack and become a paid subscriber. For as little as $5 a month, you can help support this show as well as the Gaslight Gazette and a bunch of other projects we have going on that bring important voices and important perspectives to you about media and democracy. Until next time, keep detoxing.